hard to believe that prior to the 1700s, buffalo roamed much of our nation. For that matter, most of Georgia. In the mid-19th century, it was estimated that 30 to 60 million buffalo roamed the Great Plains. But by the end of the century, they were all but gone. With their extermination, ranching and farming took over. The soil was damaged severely from overuse and industrialized agriculture. But a farmer who lives in the southwestern part of our state has a different view of farming. On a warm summer afternoon, Jim and I made the road trip to visit with Will Harris at White Oak Pastures.
In everything we do, it's an emulation of nature. We call it biomimicry. You cannot improve on a system that has evolved over millions of years. How are you going to improve on that? You can't. Best you can do is, now we humans think we can. We think we can take technology and just do it a hell of a lot better. But it's a false belief. So what we do is emulation of nature. And to be sure, our emulation of nature is imperfect. It is imperfect. And it's not as good as true nature. It's just the best we can do. And it's a skill. We get better and better at it. But in the case of the cattle, since we're right here, the best, most productive lands of the earth evolved with big herds of ruminant animals being slowly chased across the landscape by predators. And that can be, the first thing we Americans think about is the Great Plains buffalo with wolves slowly pushing them across, doing a service to the buffalo by taking out old, pre-existing conditions, genetically malformed. But what that did is it put these animals on the land with a hard animal impact. We call it disturbance, intentional disturbance. They would eat virtually, they're moving slowly shoulder to shoulder because they're prey animals and they stay bunched to prevent predators from getting them. Eating everything because it's competitive. You walking across there, you got this much space, you're trying to eat everything so these two guys won't take it away from you. So they would hammer that land. A lot of impact from feces and urine and those cloven hooves pushing that waste into the soil and pushing that plant material that got left into the soil. But then there'll be a long recovery time. And so that is exactly what we try to emulate here. So my great-grandfather came to this farm in 1866 and started farming here, and we're still on the same farm. I am the fourth generation. My daughters and their spouses work with me here as the fifth, and the sixth generation has been born. They're being raised even as we speak here on the farm. What I like most about the farm is how in the 150-something years, 6 generations, it's really come full circle. The way my great-grandfather and grandfather worked this land, what we know about it is mostly anecdotal. We know how, historically, how people farmed during that era. And it would have been very focused on the animals, the land, and the community. My father was born in 1920. He took over the farm post-World War II, and that was the generation that really industrialized agriculture. Sweeping changes. I refer to it as industrialized, commoditized, and centralized. And it was very intentional. It was done for good cause, good purpose. Europe was starving. There was a desperate need for cheap, abundant food. And the wild success of it is it made food wastefully abundant and obscenely cheap. And there were unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences fell on the backs of the animals and the land and the rural communities. Through technology, our just brilliance, human beings' brilliance at technology, we figured out how to break the cycles of nature. No other creature has ever broke the cycles of nature. I keep talking about the cycles of nature. The cycles of nature are the energy cycle with the sun, the water cycle with rain, the carbon cycle, the mineral cycle, the microbial cycle, the cycles we don't even recognize. When all those cycles operate optimally, you get the abundance. When you till the soil and put chemical fertilizer and pesticides on it, you break the cycles. When you take these animals and confine them where they're in one place all the time and feed them an unnatural feed stuff and use insecticides and hormone implants and ionospores, you break in the cycles of nature. So the way we farm our land, the way we manage our land and livestock is now very cyclical as opposed to being very linear. The industrial farm model was an attempt to make farms into factories. You know, factories are very linear. Systems is very cyclical. And my father's generation and later my generation attempted to take one of the most complex systems on the planet, which is a farm, an ecosystem, and turn it into that very linear, complicated factory system. And we talk about the difference in a complicated system versus a complex system. You know, my laptop computer is a very complicated system. A lot going on to make it work. And if one component ceases to operate, it doesn't operate. Your body or my farm is a very complex system. A lot going on to make it work. And if one component quits, it still works. Everything morphs. So the agricultural industry, attempted to apply that linear factory model to this very cyclical, complex ecosystem. And it worked beautifully. I mean, we pumped incredible amounts of beef off this land, but with unintended consequences. We damaged the land terribly. We imprisoned the animals and fed them unnatural feedstuffs and gave them drugs to make them live and perform. And the town, the rural town of Bluffton became irrelevant, economically irrelevant. It just wasn't needed anymore. And as a result, it became quite literally a ghost town. Fast forward 25 years, we started treating the ecosystem like an ecosystem and manage it holistically for not for maximum production of beef, but for promoting the life of the ecosystem. And the animals are just incredibly good looking. The land is increased in productivity, improved dramatically. We can talk about that all day. And we have a very nice little town here now. So, you know, when I started changing the way I farm, I just did it for my own self-serving purposes. I don't want to do that anymore, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do this. And financially, I could afford to do it. We certainly weren't wealthy people, but I thought I could afford to do it, and I did. And the benefits that have come from it were an absolute delightful surprise to me. You know, I didn't say this is where I want to go and start moving that way. I said I don't want to do this anymore. So I was moving away from, not toward.